So you'll see here when I put the indicator on, it's just rapidly flashing for some weird reason. It doesn't do it, and then it comes up with a warning about checking the trailer turn indicator. Wow, that's really not good. Look at that traction control light flashing. My foot is pinned to the board now, but it keeps limiting torque because it thinks that we're losing traction at the moment, and that is in tow mode. Again, there it goes. This is really not very good. G'day, I'm Paul. A couple of weeks ago we did a review of the Kia Tasman. It was detailed, we looked under it, we did off-road driving, but that was the top spec with all terrains and all the bells and whistles. So today we're stepping down one grade. This is the X line, and we're going to do towing. We're going to do some off-road driving as well, and also a bit of on-road driving, because I mentioned in that last video that I wanted to see what this was like when it wasn't on meaty all-terrain tyres. This is just sitting on sort of standard tyres. So you load it up with 3.5 tons, do some off-road driving and see how it goes. So if you do want to skip ahead to other parts of this review, you can use the time codes that are on the screen, or if you're on YouTube, you could scroll down and use the chapters below. So I'm only just going to touch on design briefly here. I mentioned in our last review negatives on the design, these lights being too far out for debris strike when you're driving off-road. I also mentioned that there were some specs that had different coloured sides on them. So you can see in some of Kia's advertising material that those sides here are the same as body colour. I think that is just a sort of better looking option. And you can see here there's a far less aggressive tyre, also has less ground clearance, so it sits closer to the ground. We actually had one car in the office the other day, I think it was a base model or one up from the base, that had one of the strangest looking bumpers I've ever seen. So it sat lower and had like a little spoiler lip on it. It's like those Thai racing trucks. So yeah, it was interesting to see that specification as well. Again, no side steps on this. This seems to be just the standard fare, and then you option them on. But again, it's just something that I would add on because it makes it easier to get in and out of the vehicle. There is a big price difference between this and the top spec. I think it's like $7,000 or thereabouts. To be honest, from the outside, I can't really tell much of a difference. And you'll see when we jump inside as well, kind of looks pretty similar as well. So there's a big price difference there, and a lot of that comes down to this having a self-locking rear differential as opposed to one that can be manually locked. It doesn't have that X-Trek mode for driving off-road with variable speed setting, but outside of that it carries a lot of the same features and technology. You still get the KFC holder on the side here, so you don't stink out the cabin with your KFC or your Indian. Go right to the back with me. Around the back it's pretty much the same, except here it says X line instead of X Pro. But importantly, we have a 3.5 ton brake capacity with a tow bar and tow ball fitted for us to actually do some towing later on today with our big trailer. So you'll remember that from our last big dual cab ute test and our SUV test. We can load this up to any weight that we want, and we're going to go all the way up to 3.5 ton with 350 kilos worth of downball weight on the tray. So a bit of a speed date here on the outside. Let's jump inside and I'll run you through some of the highlights there. Okay, so we're inside the cabin. Like I said, we've already done a detailed review on Tasman. If you do want to check that out, where I go into every single detail, click up there to watch that, or use a link in the description below. I'm just going to run through just some of the differences here between the X line and the X Pro. Now, despite the big price difference, it kind of looks the same in here. So you've got the same screen layout, same buttons up here. The differences are sort of down here where you have less off-road features that I'll run you through a little bit later on, but underbody protection, you get a little bit extra on the X Pro. You get the all-terrains, you get cooled seats, heated steering wheel and seat memory, but outside of that, it is pretty much the same in here. Thankfully, it does come with an integrated brake controller that has problems, which we'll go through when we talk about the trailer stuff later on. Outside of that, you've got smartphone mirroring built into here. This is the latest version of Kia's infotainment system with Kia Connect, so you can remotely connect to the vehicle and check the status and do all that sort of fun stuff. Then in addition to that, you also have wireless phone charging down here and plenty of storage as well, with a little table here for the tradies too, for you to do some work on if you need to, and then quite reasonable storage through the center there as well. Second row, surprisingly decent amount of leg room. You can also recline the second row as well. You have phone connectivity. It's a really sort of well thought out place with enough room for adults and storage underneath the seats as well. So it is a decent vehicle if you do want to transport a family, or if you do have workmates that you need to get around. No one is going to feel super cramped in here. Oh, sunroof is the other thing that this misses out on compared to the X Pro as well. So yeah, outside of that, nice place to be seated, but as far as I can tell, there's not enough of a big difference here between this and the top spec to really justify spending all of that extra money. Now let's hit the road. We'll see how these tyres compare to the all-terrains that were fitted to the X Pro. Okay, so we've just hit the road in the Tasman. As I mentioned, we've already done a detailed review of this, so I wanted to focus today primarily on the ride with these non-all-terrain tyres. Or non-chunky all-terrain tyres. I just want to see whether it is any different. We'll do a quick noise test as well to see how that fares. And also just see what the handling is like. A couple of things I just wanted to point out after our last review. It's really hard with a brand new car to remember everything, and there were just a couple of things that I wanted to call out that I thought were worth mentioning. With this indicator system here, where you get that's so annoying. Even though I've turned off the distraction monitor, it's still on. Yeah, with this camera that you get when you put the indicator on, great idea in theory, except when you actually need it when it's raining, it just doesn't work because water builds up on the camera and it ends up just not being visible at all, which is a little bit frustrating because it defeats the whole purpose of that system. So probably a bit of a design flaw and something that they need to look at. The other thing as well, someone emailed us and mentioned that with the brake controller, there were issues with it not quite functioning the way that it should. So we're going to test that today, and I'll run you through the details of their email as well, just to see whether we can replicate that issue, whether it's a Tasman-wide issue or just with their vehicle. Okay, so we've already touched on the engine in the previous video, discovered that it was actually fairly punchy despite on paper it not looking all that punchy. So today we're going to go for a quick lap around here. We'll talk about what the ride's like, and then I'll also do a braking test as well, just to see whether it pulls up just as well as the car with all-terrains. So on the ride front, it kind of feels pretty much the same as the car on all-terrains. I would have thought the car on all-terrains would have been a little softer, but you can see here that the ride feels pretty much the exact same despite this being on a different set of tyres. It does still feel a little on the firmer side, with the rear feeling a little disconnected from the front. It's not the end of the world, but it is something that we remember noticing with Navara as well. That is coil sprung at the rear though, so it is interesting that this kind of has that same vibe, even though it is leaf sprung at the rear. Steering feels great, and throttle pickup is good as well. Okay, so we'll hit our sine waves here at 130, just see how this feels compared to that car with the all-terrains. Okie dokie, so there's 130. Whoa. It actually feels slightly worse. It actually feels like it almost left the ground there. So you can see that there is a bit more spring in that with these tyres. Now, time for the bumpy road. This is at 90 k's an hour. Just to see what the ride feels like. Got a rattling seatbelt over there. Oh, there we go, that's fixed. Yeah, it does feel like it is on the firmer side. It's a bit strange to me. I don't know why they've gone with a firmer feel for the ride. Perhaps it has something to do with it needing to have payload on board to feel settled. So we'll see what it's like once we throw the trailer on, to see whether it feels a bit more settled with that extra load in the back. Okay, so next thing we're going to do here, I'm going to pop this into sport mode. We'll go for a lap of the ride and handling track to see how this feels compared to that other car. I did note with that other car that the tyres kind of didn't have a huge amount of traction, typical with all-terrain, so we'll see what it's like here with the more road-oriented tyres. Brake pedal feels good. Plenty of body roll there, but decent amount of traction. These tyres make a lot of difference, and you can confidently stay in that throttle. Yeah, this is the thing. They've actually done a really good job here with the handling, even though it is on the softer side with a degree of body roll there. Actually holds on fairly well, with excellent brake pedal feel as well, and like I said, great steering feel too. So I think from a handling point of view, they've done well, and certainly the car here on the road-oriented tyres feels a bit more composed, which is good. Big tick there on the handling front, even though you're not buying dual cab ute for that. We test them all back to back in the same way just to see how they perform. I mentioned in our last video that there wasn't actually a great deal of tyre noise, despite the fact it was on pretty chunky all-terrains. So we put it up against our calibrated sound meter to see how it would go in comparison to the all-terrains. And you can see the results there up on the screen. We'll also overlay the results of the car with the all-terrain, so you can sort of compare them back to back and get a vibe for whether you're going to introduce a whole lot of extra tyre noise when you do go for that chunkier all-terrain tyre. One thing I am noticing here on this car that we didn't have on the last car, there's like a grinding noise, very subtle grinding noise behind the dashboard that I think is coming from the air conditioning system. So if I switch that all off, yeah, that stops, and then when you switch it back on, you can hear that sort of grinding sound in the background there. So this car's done almost 3,000 Ks. It was used for the launch program as well. And as we saw with that last Tasman that we had up on the hoist, they had been fairly battered. So I suspect that maybe something has gone loose there behind the dashboard. Now, I said that we'd do our braking test again. I thought, let's just do our acceleration test as well at the same time. Just to see if there is any difference between this and the last Tasman that we drove. So I'll just do it in 4A. I'll turn traction control off. Pop into sport mode. Okay, here we go. Cool, feels nice and strong off the line. 80, 90, 100. 120. Okie dokie. Alright, so that was 0 to 100, 9.32 seconds, so virtually the same as the last car that we drove, and then 80 to 120 in 7.36 seconds. So, yeah, again, like I remarked in the last car, quite surprising numbers given the torque figure that the engine produces, so it's impressive that Kia's been able to wring that out of it. So we'll go back now and do a stop from 100 and see if that is just as impressive. Okay, here we go. All right, there's 100. Oh, that felt really strong. Okay, so that was 100 to 0, 2.99 seconds. 39.41 metres, so took slightly longer to stop than the car with all-terrains, which just confuses the absolute hell out of me. But yeah, still really strong stopping result. Anything between 35 and 40, just for a passenger car alone, is good for a stopping result from 100 kilometres an hour. This sort of squeezing in there is pretty impressive for a dual cab ute. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of light off-roading. We did literally this same course the other day in the X Pro, and it blew me away how good it was. So I'm assuming this will be the same. Obviously different tyres. The X Pro had some pretty meaty all-terrains. This is pretty much on highway terrain, so we'll see how this fares with our course. The big difference here though is we don't have the X-Trek mode, that is where I can set the speed for it to climb. There is a hill descent control, but there is no lockable rear differential. It is a self-locking rear differential. I really don't love these because they wait for a delta in wheel speed on the rear axle and then they lock the rear diff, and just happens randomly. You have no control over it. A button, it just solves all of that. So it's just a really bizarre thing to have, but we'll see how that fares here. Also ground clearance, the X Pro is about 20 plus millimeters higher than this, so we'll see how this goes. But all right, we're going to start in two-wheel drive high range, just in auto mode, just to see how this fares over our offset mogul. So we kick the rear driver's side wheel into the air, and then I just lay into the throttle gently and we see how it goes. There we go, that is the front left and the rear right unloaded. Now I'll just roll into the throttle. So it's got that wheel speed change, a little bit more throttle. Clunk. There's the rear diff lock engaging just there. Yeah, it's just not very nice in terms of the way that it works, but you know, I guess it does the job, and maybe it's much cheaper than a lockable rear differential, because that is the only reason you would not have a button for me to be able to lock the rear diff. All right, so we're going to go back over our mogul in the opposite direction, this time in four-wheel drive auto. Again, the other car did a great job here. Had sort of no dramas climbing over this, so we'll see how this goes. The whole idea here again is that we unload two sides of the car. You rest it up on this concrete. So there's the rear wheel in that hole, and I'll just roll onto the throttle now, again in 4A. Okay, a little more throttle. Okay, got the rotation on the rear, a little bit of traction control coming in, and then there it is. So very impressive. They've got traction control very much sorted on this car that it can just go over that with no dramas at all. So very impressive. All right, let's head over to the hill. I suspect it's probably just going to walk up here. Now, if you're unfamiliar with our hill, we do this in low range. So to engage that, pop it into neutral, flick this switch down to 4L. So I forgot to mention before, this has four-wheel drive low range, four-wheel drive high range, four-wheel drive auto for driving on sealed surfaces, and two-wheel drive high range. So I'm going to pop this into mud terrain mode. So using this button here on the steering wheel, I can either change drive modes or terrain modes. Put it in mud. It is a little muddier compared to what it was last time, and we'll see how it goes. So again, just constant throttle on the way up. I have no ability to lock that rear diff, so we'll see what happens as we climb this. Gradual speed. Okay, so losing a bit of traction there. I'll lay more into that throttle. Whoop. I'm just slipping a little over to the left here. That's not getting anywhere. This is part of the problem. It's coming up here with the rear diff lock probably disengaged, and then as a result of that, and now emergency braking for what I don't know, because there's ground behind us, I suspect. All right, let's give that one more shot. It is softer here than it was the other day, but the other car walked up here with no dramas at all. So we'll give this one more crack. Try a slightly different line here again, constant throttle. That's the other thing that's annoying me. Watch this. If I lock it into first, it's changing gear on its own. So instead of just holding first, which would probably, see that? It's just pulled into second. Instead of holding first, which would most likely get us up here, when the revs rise, it's grabbing second gear. What the hell is this thing doing? That is ridiculous. I can't lock it into first gear. That is so annoying. First gear was getting us up perfectly fine, and then it grabs second and just sends us backwards. I'll try that one more time. So on the throttle, we're getting up, we're getting up, we're getting up. Okay, there we go. That's so weird. It just kept bumping up to second gear there and stopping our motion. It's just so frustrating when they do stuff like that. It should just be, if I manually select the gear, it should just hold that gear. There is no circumstances where that should shift when we're in low range and off-road. So yeah, a little bit disappointed by all of this at the moment. Okie dokie, so we'll try hill descent control. So that's engaged. We'll pop the camera on so I can see over the edge there. I'll see how it fares down here. Let go of the brake. I'm just checking here on the steering wheel whether I have any control over the descent speed, but it doesn't look like it. Like that feature is reserved for the top spec model. So yeah, there you go. I don't know, I'm in two minds about that. I didn't really notice the gear shifting issue in the X Pro that we had. Maybe the X Pro holds the gears on its own. This one certainly doesn't. It was shifting gears on its own, and I think that is a big no-no for off-road driving, and that would be very frustrating at the best of times. So that is something they need to fix. Likewise, the AEB in reverse, that's pretty frustrating as well. But anyway, there you go. Kia Tasman off-road without the all-terrain's just not quite as impressive as the top spec with a lockable rear diff and a couple of those other modes there to play with. Righto, it is time to do some towing. This is what I've been looking forward to. So we've weighed up the trailer to 3.5 tonnes. There is 350 kilos of downbore weight on the vehicle right now. We don't have any payload in the car outside of me, and given that this thing has about a tonne to work with, there is plenty of headroom. Realistically, if you're going to be doing proper driving and loading up a caravan that is quite large like this, you're probably going to have a bit more payload in the car. What we're going to do, we're actually organising another massive ute towing test to follow up on the last one that we did, And in that one, we're actually going to load these up to a whole lot more weight than we have now. So this will just be a bit of a taster of how the Tasman tows, and then we'll do something a bit more proper with the rest of the utes in this segment. We're going to drive on a hill road. I'm going to run you through what this is once we get moving. I did get an email last week from a brand new Tasman owner who said that they were having a lot of difficulty with the integrated brake controller and it being funny with the lights on his jet ski, and we're having the exact same issue. He said that he actually brought it up with his dealer and they tested it on a number of cars at the dealership and they all had the same problems. This looks like it is a manufacturing defect of some sort. So you'll see here when I put the indicator on, it's just rapidly flashing for some weird reason. It doesn't do it, and then it comes up with a warning about checking the trailer turn indicator. It doesn't do it when the gain is set to 0, but it does for any other gain. So obviously a design flaw and something that they need to look at. Alrighty, let's kick things on and do a bit of towing testing. Okay, so I'm just going to ignore any warnings and stuff that appear. I've set the gain just because I want to be able to stop. So this is the hill road. We use this in a lot of our testing. Basically, it's representative of an Australian country road, and we want to see how the Tasman performs on that road compared to some of the other vehicles we've tested before. So I'm going to put it into tow mode, which you do by pushing and holding the drive mode button. You'll see tow come up. It makes the gearbox a bit more aggressive in terms of gear holding. There is also a bunch of settings you can play with here in terms of checklists for your trailer. You can also configure trailer lengths and that kind of thing in the towing screen as well. So straight off the bat here, my foot is pinned to the board and you can see the speed is not going up at all. And this isn't even the steep section. So while Kia's been a bit creative in terms of the transmission and shifting through a lot of gears to make it feel responsive, here when you've got a load on the back, it definitely feels sluggish. And that was stability control just giving us a little bite there as well, which is crazy when I'm doing 50 k's an hour, going pretty casually around a corner. So I've got it in four-wheel drive automatic here as well. We'll see what it's like as we come out of the gully down here and make our way to the top of the hill. In terms of the ride, on this slower section, it's feeling pretty good with 3.5 tons on the back. See what it's like when we get to the bumpier section right near the end. And this is a great little climb out of here because it doesn't look all that steep, but when you're carrying this much weight and coming out at a low speed, it really does test the vehicle. There we go, we're pinned to the board there. It's gradually picking up speed. Yeah, it doesn't feel anywhere near as punchy as a Hilux, for example. Again, traction control light is flashing there for some bizarre reason. Wow, that's really not good. Look at that traction control light flashing. My foot is pinned to the board now, but it keeps limiting torque because it thinks that we're losing traction at the moment, and that is in tow mode. Again, there it goes. This is really not very good. Alrighty, so this is the tricky part. We have a steep hill climb here, and this really challenged a lot of those dual cab utes when we were testing last time. Last time we were only testing at 2.5 tons, so we do have an extra ton on the back here, and when we redo this test, this is a 15% grade, we'll be aiming to replicate this much weight on the back. So that's pinned to the board right now, so it is gaining speed, which is good. We'll see what happens when it grabs this next gear. Yeah, I mean, it's gaining speed just. It is holding that gear and now dropping back speed as we get to the top. Yeah, it sort of doesn't inspire you with a great deal of confidence. Keep in mind, if you were towing a 3.5 ton caravan on the back of your vehicle, you would also have yourself, maybe your other half, kids in the back as well. So you're going to be adding extra weight. So I think it would become significantly slower the more weight you added into it. Okay, last part of our test is our long descent here. I'm just going to see what it's like in terms of engine braking. I'll get it up to about 70 and then we'll just play with these paddle shifters here and see how that goes. Now in terms of your GVMs and GCMs, we've got them up on screen there. If you are towing at 3,500 kilos, you're going to be locked out by the GCM. You'll be at about sort of 500 kilos worth of payload in the vehicle, and GVM gives you a little bit more headroom. So it is just worth keeping in mind, like what we're doing now, it is just me in the car, but that means you've still got another 400 odd kilos to play with if you are towing 3.5 tons. So yeah, it's not a huge amount of capacity, and it is worth keeping in mind if you do want to head away with a vehicle like this. Okay, so reaching the bottom of the hill here, a bit of engine braking. See, third is still running away from me at 70 there, and I can't drop back to second. See what it's like on the bouncier section down the bottom here. See, I think this is where the firmer ride is coming in handy for the vehicle. Yes, it is a little bit floaty over that stuff. But yeah, it's not as floaty as it could be if the ride was softer like it is in some of these dual cab utes. Okay, so Kia Tasman towing. To be honest, I'm a little bit disappointed. So the power thing, you know, it's not the end of the world. You kind of look at the numbers on paper and you'd realise that if you stick a 3.5 tonne trailer on the back, it's going to feel a little sluggish. I'm more concerned about the traction control light flashing there, whether it's stability control or traction control. One of those things is being triggered as we're driving and not really overworking the car there at 50 k's an hour. And that is something they definitely should have picked up during the engineering process. The brake controller, I mean, surely they did towing during the engineering process and would have discovered that it was doing random stuff with the lights flashing at 1,000,000 miles an hour there. So especially before you ship it to customers. So I think all those things combined, I'd be sort of just thinking twice if you're going to be towing with this until they sort out certainly the traction control thing, which is probably just a software fix, and certainly the brake controller thing, which is a software fix as well. So yeah, in terms of towing performance there, I'm not entirely blown away with it. Hopefully this is all stuff they can fix before we get all of the dual cab utes together for a proper big towing test where we really want to push these things to their limits and figure out which dual cab ute is going to be best for towing at this end of the price range. Now, second nibble at the Kia Tasman, this time not the top spec and also a bit of towing. So firstly, with the off-road stuff, yeah, I mean, just having a button to lock the diff is all they needed to kind of just sort that situation out. It did eventually make it up the hill, but it was a fair bit of work. It kept changing up gears, which I didn't experience in the top spec model. So those are all things that they really need to sort out. If I want to lock in a gear, it should hold a gear. It shouldn't just be randomly shifting up when I don't want it to. On the towing stuff though, I mean, the stability control and traction control coming in, that's unacceptable because that is killing your flow while you're moving, especially when I'm not even driving recklessly. It's like 50 k's an hour on throttle. It's then just constantly biting and then stopping our motion. And I think that is something they urgently need to address if someone is going to be towing with this. And likewise as well, that trailer brake controller issue, I think it's an easy fix, but it is something they need to look at because it will ultimately affect your ability for those lights to work correctly when you are actually out there towing and you need it to count. One other thing we noticed as well, we had a GoPro stuck underneath the back there having a look at the suspension. And if you remember our last video when I had the Tasman up on the hoist, it looked like there were actually impact marks on the bump stop and also on the lower leaf spring. And when you have a look at the camera vision under there, this is actually hitting that bump stop pretty frequently. So if you are loading up to the top end of this, just expect that ride to bottom out every now and then as it collects the bump stop or the lower bump stop on that leaf spring. Mentioned before with GCM and GVM, this is depending on how big your trailer is and how much load you've got in the vehicle. You've got about 500 kilos to play with when you are towing 3.5 tons. So not a huge amount, but you will notice that it becomes significantly slower the heavier it is loaded. So I think the ideal weight for this vehicle is going to be around that 2 to 2.5 ton mark. That's where it's going to feel comfortable and have plenty of payload left as well, because it does feel just a little bit short on power when you are trying to get up it. So let me know what you reckon in the comments section below. Have you had a look at one of these for towing? Have you tried towing with a Tasman? Let us know which vehicles you want us to include in our big towing test as well, because there are so many dual cab utes on the market at the moment in Australia. If you did enjoy the video, please make sure you like it and you share it with your mates. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon button. Until next time, take it easy.